Please help me welcome to the stage Russlynn Ali and Dr. May Jemison.
As we were reflecting on this conversation, one of the places you could go, or you think you can go, to reflect on who you are and this wisdom is this lovely book called May Among the Stars. It purports to tell the story of how you came to be.
So I want you to stop saying the name of the book, because I'm not necessarily going to down the book or whatever. But I think one of the things that's really important is your childhood. And we very frequently do not give enough credit for what happens during your childhood, because that's where you learn to explore the world around you. That's where you develop your confidence in your ability to think, to do things. And I was in kindergarten, and you know your kindergarten teacher always asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Yeah. So, you know, I have my hand up in the air. She finally calls me. She has fireman, policeman, teacher, and I said, I want to be a scientist. And she looked at me and she said, well, don't you mean a nurse? And there's nothing wrong with being a nurse, but she was trying to help me, I know what the term is, manage my expectations as a little girl growing up on the south side of Chicago during that period of time. And I just put my hands on the hip and said, no, I mean a scientist. And I was really pissed that she didn't believe this is what I could do, right? And this book that recently came out, the way this author chose to write the story was that I got upset and I went home crying to my mother because this teacher told me something different. And I'm not sure why the author chose to make it a typical story that somebody else might tell, because that was not my story. It had never been told that way. And so that's one of the things I think that we come up against all the time, is how people see you and how they want to retell your story.
And that story is about a whole lot more than remarkable 6 years in space, right? That story is of a lifelong learner, as Andrea mentioned, the 100-year starship, right? You are defying everything we know about conventional science, everything we know about interstellar travel, right? You are taking us to a new world. For those of us in the room that don't know enough about that program, tell us about your life now as an entrepreneur.
So I always assumed I would go into space. I grew up during the Apollo era. And I just assumed I'd go into space. And even though there was never, at the time, there wasn't any women in the US program going to space, Valentina Tereshkova in Russia had gone up. And even though we didn't have any people of color in space, I didn't really care. I assumed I'd go into space because it was such a tremendous arc. But here's what I want you to imagine. Here's this little 8-year-old running around in the neighborhood on the south side of Chicago where I grew up, telling folks why space was important, right? Because during that time, if you remember, a lot of folks thought space didn't have anything to do with them. And a lot of people still don't. But fundamentally, we have been changed by space exploration. And so even though people don't think it has anything to do with them, it has to do with everything we're doing right now, the push to miniaturize, right? And so what 100-Year Starship is about how do we get that same kind of incredible innovation going. We talk about investing in things right now, but what do we invest in? What's the time horizon that you all are looking for companies here? 5 years?
Yeah, we want to see ROI soon.
ROI in 5 years, but we have to change how we think about investment. How do we invest for a long period of time? What is it that we get out of it, and even human behavior? So it's really those issues around these challenges that make a difference. So 100-Year Starship is about making sure that capabilities exist for human interstellar travel. And in solving those capabilities, we change things. There's so many things that go into this. And so that's the reason, that's one of the things I'm doing now, is how do we tell the story? How do we get more people involved? Because it's that involvement of people, that transdisciplinary, not interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary involvement that's going to make the difference, and that's going to make a difference in our world.
And that's about know-how. It's also about thinking about the way we do our work differently, right? I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your experience of accessing things that people didn't think you could at the high school level, and how do we make sure that those coming behind us have access to the knowledge and acquisition of the skills that will take them to take us into this next century.
I think as adults, we just have to stand up because we're full of bull twinkie right now. That's a technical term, bull twinkie. But and when I say that, I see the world as we don't care about other people's children. Right. And the reality is that we have to. I lived in California before I went to NASA, before I joined the astronaut program. I was actually in Los Angeles at the time Prop 13 was passed, which basically gutted California schools from, I think California were like the best schools in the country at the time. Yes. Now we're hanging around with Mississippi, isn't it? Yeah. Somewhere around there. So just think what that said. It said, my kids have been through school. I don't care what happens to yours. But then you're sort of cutting, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face or whatever, because now when we need this education and when, I don't want to get old and people don't know how to take care of me. I mean, when you think about it, right? Just stop for a second. But even beyond that, as adults, if we do nothing else, we should be able to educate children. And we should not be putting it off till, hey, let's wait. We don't have the money for that now. We have to build a sports stadium. So we're not going to put any money in the schools right now. Kids don't get a do-over on 8 years old. We have people who are running school systems who have minimal knowledge around human development and childhood development, which is very fundamental to understanding how we educate.
That's right.
Right? So those are the issues. I don't think we care. I really don't think we care. We give a lot of lip service to it. We don't care. Sometimes I think parents don't care either. Because think about it. We vote and say, let's fund schools with the lottery. The extra money we need for schools, we're going to get it from a lottery. Just think about the message they're saying. See, kids are really smart too. So they know what you're telling them. And when we would, can I do this one?
Yeah.
Can I do this one? When we will spend more money on our hair than we will on books, y'all know what I'm talking about. There's a problem. You're giving them very specific messages, and they're bright enough to get them. So it's not about children, it's about us.
How do we create the civic and political will? It's not about evidence, right? We have the evidence of what we know works. We don't have the civic and political will to see the change. What's your advice to everyone in this room that is a change agent in their own right to do something?
Use your place at the table, right? Everybody's always saying they want a place at the table, and then they act just like everybody else, and they mind their table manners, right? So use your place at the table. You have to bring your experiences to bear. Now that we've started saying we're going to ship and distribute everything, what do those boxes that we order stuff come in? The box comes in a box we were talking about with paper around it in a box. Do you have a hard time getting rid of those boxes now? But we're talking about the trees and the oxygen and all the other kinds of things. But that's a model, and I know people are looking at me really hard right now. And so that's what my place at the table is. Do I have the nerve to say this in this room? One of the questions I get frequently is, what thing struck you? What was it like? When you look down at the earth, it like sort of shimmers from within. It sparkles, right? I remember passing over the Nile Delta, and I remember in Africa, and then the Horn of Africa, and it was like this shimmering brown, red color, and it was incredible. And then if you look down, there was this like really thin shimmering layer of blue light. Just beautiful. That was our atmosphere, right? That sustained us. And I look at the stars and the moon, and something really struck me. This is what struck me. You know how people say, save the earth? They're mistaken. The earth will be here, right? But the problem we have as humans is it might not sustain our life form. So this always brings me to what do we do now? Like, what is our place? Is to try to figure out how do we connect back to this planet?
So I want to go back to what made you you. This notion of, without tears, adamant and precociousness around, I want to be a scientist. But there was a point in time where dancing was also, I mean, Andrea said, right, a wannabe dancer. There's actually you got some real street cred on this dancing front, right? Was there a point in time in your life where you made a choice?
Well, sometimes you have to make choices. So I did both my whole life, and I did lots of art work as well, and I didn't really see one as one or the other. But when I was getting ready to graduate, I'd already been accepted in medical school, but I really wanted to be, I thought about being a professional dancer. And so the big question is whether I go to New York City to try to become a professional dancer or go to medical school. And my mother helped me to decide. But not in the way you think. She said, you can always dance if you're a doctor, but you can't necessarily doctor if you're a dancer. But the other thing is she asked me, well, why do you want to dance? I had to think through, why did I want to dance? Why did I want to be a professional dancer? It was about the joy, it was about the physicality, it was about so many other things. I did not have to be a professional dancer to get that. So I took classes at Alvin Ailey when I was in New York City. They were on East 69th Street. I didn't have a lot of money, so sometimes I was eating noodles. But I wanted to do this. It was really important to me. So yeah, I did it all the time. When you think about it, one of the defining things about dancers is that you have to practice all the time. You have to be to be good, you have to be very self-critical, and at the same time know when you're doing something well, right? You have to work with teams, because usually you're not dancing by yourself. There's usually a lot of other stuff going on around you, so you have to know where people are. So it's one of those things where you look and how do you connect one thing to another? I think that's the biggest part we have to learn, is how do we integrate the different parts of our lives. They're not separate. Each one of them influences you in some way. How do we take the best from it?
That's right. What you took to space with you exemplifies that, right? Speaking of Alvin Ailey. Can you say a little more?
When you astronauts get to take souvenirs up into space with them for other people. So some of the things I took up with me, I took a poster of Judith Jemison performing the dance Cry, right? For all black women everywhere. I took up a Bundu statue, B-U-N-D-U statue, Women's Society and Women and Girls Society in West Africa. I tried to include people or organizations who would not have been included. I love my alma mater, Stanford and Cornell, but they had banners up before. They didn't need somebody else to take up a banner for them, right? But I wanted to take up and include people that had not been included in some kind of way to make that touchstone. Because, space is one of those things that belong to all of us. And so it's really, how do we connect people?
Yeah. Lastly, look up August of 2018. Tell us about that.
From what I can tell from that thin shimmering layer of light, nothing is going to happen until we see ourselves as earthlings. Until we understand we share this planet.
Right.
None of that other stuff is going to make any difference, because we're going to do it. So I believe in experiential learning. You were asking about learning. I believe in experiential. That's the best thing you can do. But it has to be something simple. What connects us? The sky. The reality is that space is one of our oldest technologies. We learned to navigate using the stars and the sun. We learned how to plant crops based on moon and sun cycles and all of those things. So we want to say one day, August 2018, for the same 24 hours around the world, we want people to look up and record what they think, what they feel, their ideas, their visions, their hopes, their dreams. Whether it's a little video, picture. And what we're doing with 100 Year Starship and the Dorothy Jemison Foundation, which is named after my mother, Chicago public school teacher for 25 years, is we're providing a platform to upload this and create a tapestry so that you can actually go in and dig down and see who's doing what and posting what around the world. So www.lookuponesky.org. Yema Coker has cards.
Yeah,
I couldn't come without cards.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for gifting us with your presence.